Okay, sounds like we are live. Thank you, James Anderson, for letting us know. Why don't we get started? So, folks, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today to learn a little bit more about automation. My name is Pankaj. I am one of the founders of Sense. Sense is an engagement platform. We started the company about 5 years ago, dedicated to the staffing industry. And today we have over 400 customers that we work. I am delighted today to be joined by Ron Washburn and Scott Gordon, both industry veterans and friends of mine. I will let them introduce themselves for a second, and then we'll get kicked off. Ron?
Yeah, sure. Great. Thanks, Pankaj. I'm one of the vice presidents at Soliant. We're a healthcare staffing company, and we've been around for a little more than 28 years. Also oversee some of the initiatives in our company and spend most of my time working with our nursing and allied health teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Gordon. I'm the Vice President of Talent Solutions and partner with Vaco, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We've been in the market, I've been in the market for well over 18 years, focused specifically on accounting, finance, healthcare, technology staffing solutions, as well as just general staffing solutions, now globally.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ron. So, what we wanted to talk about today is why should you even care about automation? And when you think about automation, the first thing I wanted to start by is something that, hopefully most of you will agree with on what the staffing companies or staffing operations of today look like. And the thing that I didn't mention in my introduction was before I started Sense, I ran staffing companies for 15 years. So this is something that I actually witnessed firsthand. Staffing operations have a lot of inefficiency. This is what a typical candidate or a talent pipeline funnel looks like. If you look at this funnel, if you started with 1,000 candidates, you would be lucky if you got to a point that 100 of those people got a job offer. So you want to lose 90% of the people right at the top of the funnel. Of the 100 people who get a job offer, again, you'll be lucky if 80 of them actually show up and start work. This is what we now typically call offer to start drop off or just drop off ratios, right? So there's about 20% of the people who drop off there. And then of the folks who start, there's going to be other people who leave in the middle of the assignment, which is essentially turnover. And then of the people who finish that assignment, a dismally small percentage of those people, oftentimes 3 to 5% of those people actually get redeployed on a subsequent assignment. So this is what a staffing funnel today looks like. The staffing industry spends over $60 billion a year in acquiring candidates and actually then ends up wasting $24 billion in turnover. So, can automation help you with essentially increasing the efficiency during this funnel? That's the majority of what we want to talk about today. And then what you see on the right-hand side is what the life of a recruiter looks like. This is a day in the life of a recruiter. A typical recruiter spends no more than a third of his or her time in actually doing what we call human stuff, which is either talking to a candidate or talking to a customer and convincing them to work together with each other. The rest of their time is either spent on prospecting, upkeeping the ATS, entering data, all the stuff that can actually be automated. So this is, essentially the principal problem statement that I think automation can solve. Ron, Scott, I'll turn this back to you guys because, obviously you are much closer to this than I am. But if you have any comments on what you guys see in your businesses around this funnel, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Pankaj. I don't know if our stats or percentages are exactly the same, but we see a lot of people fall out of the funnel. And historically, that's because despite some of the tools that we have, really our recruiters rely on what's on their mind, what's in their brain, and tend to miss a lot of things because there is so much busy work that comes along with staffing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's I look at some things that, your brain is geographic, and it just depends on which geographic region you're in at the time. It depends on who's standing over you, screaming with more orders and more orders. So
that's right.
It is constantly split up. With like Pankaj says, it just depends on the time of the day.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think we are all in a world now that automation is something that you absolutely have to think about. But when I think about automation, I almost think that automation is table stakes now. Partly because of the pandemic that we went through, are still going through. It absolutely accelerated digital transformation. Everybody had to figure out how to use technology to run their business. Your employees were remote, your talent was remote, you couldn't meet with your hiring managers. So a lot of automation has started already, and it is now constantly evolving. The way we think about automation is there are actually two different classes of automation. You absolutely need both of them. There is no question about that. One is just what you would call just maintenance and data cleaning, just hygiene, making sure that your ATS is clean, making sure that your ATS has up-to-date data, making sure that it becomes the first source of information that your recruiters go to. I cannot tell you how many companies I've talked to where people will tell us they've been collecting candidates in their database for dozens of years. Now they have 1 million people, but they have no clue if that data is good. It is absolutely stale, and they're still spending tons and tons of money on job boards. And then, of course, there is the more sophisticated event triggered automation. Automation that gonna goes out, happened. Somebody started, somebody ended, somebody had a work anniversary, somebody sent you a referral. A lot of those things that are very personal because they happen based on an event, they happen exactly when they should happen. So this is how I think about the paradigm of automation. I obviously want to get Scott and Ron's thoughts on this. Structured the conversation today is right after this, we will get into here are the 3 or 4. If you think about the talent life cycle and break that into 3 or 4 steps, here is every place that you can use automation and how. But before we get there, I wanted to get some thoughts from Ron and Scott. So Ron, Scott, I mean, one thing that I'd ask you, because it's probably on everybody's mind as we're starting this new year, if you were to think about 2020, which was an extraordinary year, we're just coming off of 2020. I was curious to ask you both, what's the one word that you would think to describe 2020? What's that word, and why do you think that's what 2020 was?
I'll start. I think my word for 2020 is absolutely unique. We've all gone through. If you've been in this industry for a while, you went through the recession, you understood the recession, you came out of the recession much stronger. And when they started to lock things down and things started to get a little weird, we all wondered if it was going to be like the recession again, and it wasn't. The money didn't disappear, the money was still there, and it still is there. And we've all been in definitely unique situations where we're working remotely, missing loved ones and friends, but also how that applies to work. You're definitely seeing unique situations, unique hiring situations pop up left and right, and every day is a learning opportunity. So unique is my word for the year.
Okay, got it. Pretty cool. Ron?
That's great, Scott. My word would be hectic. As you might imagine, in healthcare staffing, it's been a frenetic pace for us around here. We're placing clinicians literally on the front lines of some of the hot spots. Really high demand, really worn out clinicians, and worn out recruiters as well, just trying to keep pace to get nurses where they need to be around the country. So while it's been hectic and everybody's worn out, it's also been one of those years, or was one of those years, where it was really easy to tie purpose to work for us. So really proud of what our clinicians have done, what our recruiters have done to help get the country, the hospitals in the country where they need to get to.
Yeah, nope, you're absolutely spot on.
I think every country would thank you for the work that you're doing there. So it's our hats are off to you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Especially our nurses. They are really getting it done for us.
Yeah. So Ron, given what you just said and how you think about what these workers are doing at the front line, I mean, why is from your vantage point, why is automation important? I mean, why should anybody bother about that at all?
Yeah, when I think about automation, we tend to think of it in a few different areas. One is, how do we help our colleagues become more efficient? How do we create better experiences, more consistent experiences for our candidates and our clients? And then how do we just improve that idea of engagement and re-engagement? And I think automation really hits home on all three of those areas for us. And we're kind of at the beginning stages of really taking advantage of it. But for us, it's an opportunity to get better in all of those areas.
Fair enough. Scott, any thoughts on that?
You know what? I've always been a fan of automation. I tried to automate when I first started recruiting 20 years ago, back in the Ice Age. Now you've got so many products that are available. You've got so many candidates that are available, and it's a just-in-time model that we all have to adjust to. People are they want feedback instantly. It's just like I just ordered lunch. I ordered lunch from across town. It's there. The same can be said, and I want to know where my food is, when it's going to be here so I can eat. The same can be said for candidates. I want to know where my job is and when can I start. And I'd rather, in some cases, not talk to a human being. Can I just do it through an app some way? So it's realizing that's most important right now, because you've got such a plethora of tools that it's just absolutely necessary that automation has to come into play somewhere, not only to use the tools, but to be able to manage the information that's coming through them.
Got it. So, Scott, let me ask you this thing. I mean, so clearly, you've been an automation expert. You've been a fan of that forever. But in your head, what are some of the challenges that automation can solve for you? I mean, you guys are a big sort of, big company. You've got, dozens of offices across the country. Like, are there any particular metrics you're trying to move? Are there any particular challenges you're trying to solve with automation? Like, how do you think about it?
Well, we obviously talk about redeployment, which is a huge issue. You talk about a limited number of employees, or a limited number of people that are considered experts in their field. I had a conversation with a recruiter this morning that was having difficulty maintaining a relationship with 60 different people that she had on billing in her city. And that's hard to do when you're trying to manage your existing book of business, all the while trying to bring in new business and to make your business development people satisfied. So that's certainly the biggest challenge. And time is money. You can't get time back, so you need to definitely be able to monopolize that time. And that's how automation has definitely has helped.
Got it. Ron, how about you? I mean, I know you just said that you're at the beginning stages of automation, but what would be your North Star? What would be, hey, I wish automation would solve these challenges for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Scott said and so many more things than I'll answer. But one of the big things for us is just finding talented recruiters. It's been harder and harder for us to do that through the years, the pandemic, pre-pandemic, that is. But we know just the war for talent is going to continue. So for me, if I can take a successful recruiter, a talented recruiter, and free up their time by dropping some automations that allow them to do away with some busy work and focus on the more important relationship building between candidates and clients, that for me, that's an opportunity for us to grow without having to add headcount.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, when I talk to several CEOs, they certainly talk about how automation is actually impacting their bottom line. They are. We've now talked to companies where they had employee relation reps that were managing maybe 100 contractors. Now those same people are able to manage 300 to 400 contractors. So certainly automation and human touch go hand in hand, but great to sort of hear from the trenches in terms of how you guys think about automation. So, for our listeners, for everybody who's listening, I think what we wanted to delve into today, just to give you some practical sort of tips and tricks that you can take back from this session. I mean, we absolutely want to make sure that this is just, thought of it from a practitioner standpoint. What could you do right after this session? So what we've tried to do here is, think about 4 different areas on how the talent lifecycle progresses and how automation can help in those areas. So we'll try and talk through them one by one. So first is, your very basic, your database automation. So, As far as database automation is concerned, there are two different kinds of automations that I think about a lot. One is this whole idea of enrichment and orchestration. What does that mean? Well, you're sitting on top of 1 million people in your database, or 10 million people, database. An automation platform can help you keep that database 100% sanitized at all times. You can ask hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, hey, are you looking for a job right now? People who say yes, you automatically move them to an active status within your applicant tracking system. People who say no, you move them to a passive status, and you can nurture them differently. People who say yes, you can ask them exactly when would you be available for your next job, February, March, April, whatever the case might be. You can also do database orchestration. What that means is, a recruiter left your company today. This recruiter was working with 300 different candidates, had 300 candidates associated to his or her name. You can automatically keep your database sanitized by saying, great, this person left today, all of this person's people should be automatically reassigned to this new recruiter, Keith, Stephanie, John, whatever the case might be. So you can just absolutely make sure that nothing in your database ever breaks. So that's something that automation will do for you. The second thing that automation will do for you is this re-engaging with talent in your database. This is a mind-blowing stat that we've now heard from our customers over and over. As it turns out, about 50% of the placements that some of the largest staffing companies make today are made from candidates who already existed in your database. Yet every one of your recruiters is first going to a job board before going to their ATS, because they just don't trust the data in your ATS. They don't trust if it is up to date, if you have the most recent resume, so on and so forth. So these two things work in tandem. If you're able to keep your database sanitized, it'll probably become the first place your recruiters go to, because what better than actually going someplace where you can find everything in one go and actually run a submittal process from there. So that's how we think about automating, the first part of your funnel, which is the top of the funnel. Where do you get candidates from? So, so as we talk about this, Ron, I'm going to throw this back at you. But one of the things that we've seen is, this past year, like you talked about, nursing, healthcare, that's one industry that's just seen incredible growth. And because of that, the demand has skyrocketed. I know you talked about this a little bit, but can you fill us in on how automation maybe have impacted your ability to meet this demand, or maybe even do some documentation automatically around when somebody's credentials are expiring, or licenses, so on and so forth, or maybe there are COVID questionnaires at play here?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we have all sorts of workflows built out, but a couple that are specific to some of the COVID work we've done. We just had an automated weekly campaign that would push out COVID hotspot jobs to select types of candidates, ICU nurses, respiratory therapists, that sort of thing, that would just automatically go out. We would drop in the new hotspots. Obviously, that is a little bit manual, but that constant engagement with the candidates to help them see these new positions and bring them back to jump into one of these opportunities. Thinking about COVID too, we ended up doing a lot of health screening work over the course of last year, and just one of the things we had to track was whether our health screeners were healthy. So we had to just document that we have not been exposed to COVID, or they had not been exposed to COVID. It does not have COVID, obviously. And we're able to automate that, where they are, on a weekly basis, completing questionnaires that basically check all of their health and keep us documented for our clients. And then again, just the idea of servicing clients that are in desperate need. We saw a lot of that with those two specific specialties, ICU and respiratory, and continually engaging and re-engaging with them to keep them on the front lines.
Got it. Yeah, super helpful. One of the things that I keep hearing from our customers is nearly everybody was able to automate a COVID questionnaire or a COVID FAQ, because they'll essentially ask their workers, hey, have you had any symptoms in the past 3 days? Have you had this? Have you had that? And if the answers are, what they were basically, looking for or watching for, then they would either sort of involve a contact tracer or ask somebody to, go to a hospital, go see a doctor, but do not show up for work. So, God knows how many more other infections we were able to, stop because of that. But that's a use case that I just hear a lot in the industry now.
Yeah, that's exactly how we were using it.
Got it. Got it. So, move forward from database automation. This is the area that we're quite passionate about, which is just recruitment marketing. How do you give your recruiters and your marketers, just automation superpowers? So I'll talk through a couple of examples in here, but I really want to hear from our panelists on this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, nurturing your database. So here is the big thing that you can do, or here is the big thing that sophisticated companies are now doing with their database. They're first of all segmenting it into the kind of constituents that you want to talk about. So for example, you may send a very different message to a candidate than you might send it to an alumni. Then of course, something that you might send to an active contractor. You might also nurture your silver medalists very differently. So we talk about silver medalists a lot. Here are 10 people who interviewed for a job. Obviously, one person got that job and the other 9 did not. The 9 people that did not get a job but did get great, fantastic feedback from the hiring manager, that they will get placed someplace else really quickly. So you have to keep engaged with them. You have to over-engage with them, over-communicate with them, because they're a hot commodity. And if you are the ones who engage with them more, they will probably be more beholden to you. They'll probably think this company will probably take better care of us. So there is this whole idea of, first of all, just nurturing your database so you always have a pipeline of talent. The second is this idea of how do you pair automation with AI? Actually use a chatbot, which is what they popularly known as now, or a conversational assistant. That way you can enrich your database at scale. You might have 10,000 people coming to your website every single month, or 100,000, who knows? You can actually engage with every single one of those people. I'll tell you some of the top use cases that our customers have now talked about from an automation standpoint. Number one, they're engaging with 100% of the people who come to the website. This was a big pain point that people have been trying to solve for years, or whoever applies to your job, could be LinkedIn, Career Builder, Monster, wherever. If somebody applies to a job, you will always hear in our industry people saying, well, I never heard back. But with a chat bot, it'll automatically engage with every single person, and you will either get passed on to a recruiter because you're a great candidate, or if you're not a good fit, you will at least get some sort of a closure and say, please apply for other jobs. We'll stay in touch with you. This one's not good for you. The second thing that we hear is you can pre-screen people. If you're looking for, what Ron just talked about, or in the light industrial world, if you're looking for a certain skill set, a forklift operator, a picker packer, you might as well ask them right up front, will you lift 50 pounds a day? Can you stand on your feet 8 hours a day? So on and so forth. And people who say no to that, you can just screen them out. The third thing is diversity and inclusion. It removes all conscious and unconscious bias. A chatbot will talk to anybody. It will not be biased based on, race or gender or name or ethnicity. You remove that bias, which means you're going to get better candidates and even talent that you would have potentially lost out on. One example that's one of my favorites right now to Ron's world, many of the nurses and the healthcare workers that are on the front line, it turns out that the only time they can get a break is at midnight. And that's the only time they can actually go to a website or browse something and say, I'm looking for a job. Well, they're not going to find a recruiter at that point, but they will find a bot. They will have a natural language conversation. And if they screen in for a role that they're a good fit for, they can schedule a conversation at a time that works for them. And then the third thing that you can automate from a recruitment marketing standpoint is your brand. I mean, this has become increasingly important with everybody. What is your NPS score? What is your Glassdoor score? You can use automation to make sure that, first of all, you are asking this question to everybody. And secondly, people who are responding and saying, yeah, we love your company. You are a 10 on 10. Those are the people you immediately redirect to social media. Those are the people you give some sort of an incentive to say, please fill us a review. We'll send you a, sort of a Starbucks gift card or something just to thank you for your time, because you want people who like you to also say that publicly, because more often than not, only people who don't like you take the time to write those reviews. So here are 2 or 3 examples on things that you can do, on the recruitment marketing side. But this is where I also have a ton of questions for, Ron and Scott. So Scott, I'll throw this one at you. I mean, it's no secret. I mean, we've worked with you for a number of years, and we see that you're probably one of the best companies when it comes to sending out communication that has extremely high open rates, like 70-75% of your communications are opened. Over 40% of any communication that you send is responded to. I mean, what is your secret?
It's all robots. So it's all robots and diesel fuel is what it is. But no, seriously, I think when anybody hears the term automation or artificial intelligence or all of that, you automatically assume that it's robots, and robots are going to take over the world. And if a candidate feels like they get something like that from us, that it sounds like that it can be robotic, and that's what we wanted to avoid. So the culture is the cornerstone of our entire company, but it's also communication, and it's how you communicate effectively with someone else. If we know that, and when we knew that we were going to implement some sort of AI solution or an automated solution, it's not that we just flipped the switch and turned it on, and all of our consultants and candidates and clients just started getting these bot-related messages, if you will, that didn't touch home. It's a way of saying, look, here's what we're doing. We are implementing something like this. You may get messages from me time to time that seem automated, or they may, you may hear a few clicks or beeps in the background from the robot, but it's coming from me. If you reply to that, it's coming directly to me. And what that does is that helps me stay in touch with you when I may have a fire over there that I've got to deal with. But I think the biggest piece is communicating and over communicating with your talent and with your clients, and letting them know, look, we're implementing this solution to be able to serve you better. We also took a very hard look at what those messages contain. If they contained, if I said, dear Mr. Jindal, hello, this is Scott. That's just not my style, and it's not how I would ever text you or send you a note. We looked at those, and we looked at the real language behind that, and we adjusted to that. And it's worked really, really well for us.
Super helpful. Those are some really practical tips and tricks. I can tell you that, if you make automated messages as close to your personal sort of tone, people just absolutely end up responding to it. Yeah. How about you guys? I mean, how do you leverage recruitment marketing?
Yeah, I think one of the most popular workflows we use is along the new lead touch point that we have set up. So obviously, all companies spend a lot of money to try and gather new leads. We want to make sure we're taking advantage of those when they come through. So we have an automation that tracks new leads that come into our system, and tracks whether we have a note documented against that. And if we don't, after a couple of days, they'll get a message from us asking if they're still interested in that job. And if they respond yes, then that will, instead of going back to that same recruiter, it'll go to a manager who can then go find a resource that has a little more free time to engage with that candidate. And the stats you gave for Scott, I would say, are very similar to ours. The high 70s for open rates on those types of message, almost 60% on response rate. So obviously that's keeping those candidates engaged that would otherwise we would just never have reached out again to, or they'd be on an assignment with someone else by the time we reached back out to them.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to add, you'd mentioned the idea of sort of managing your social media presence earlier, and that what you described is almost exactly one of the workflows we have, where we'll ask them to rate us or survey us, and the good scores, yes, we're going to ask for an online review, which is great, but the other half of that is, if we're getting a bad score, that's going to trigger an event to a manager to go back and coach our recruiters. So it's also an opportunity to help our internal staff get better and understand why they're losing candidates.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I will tell you what we've seen some of our other customers do. They will immediately ask people at the end of their first day, how was your first day on a scale of 1 to 5? And people who respond 4 or 5, they will immediately send them a second message and say, hey, what's your address and what's your size? We're going to send you a company t-shirt. Their whole story there is, these guys like us already. Let's make them a brand ambassador, wear our apparel and walk around, just be our marketing guys.
Yeah.
And if somebody responds with a 1, 2, or 3, they'll immediately send an alert to the recruiter and say, call this person now. Because, not only do you just absolutely from a good customer service standpoint want to solve the issue that this person has, those are exactly the kind of people who do not show up back on their second day. They've only worked for you for 1 day. They just figured out that they probably made a mistake. This company didn't turn out to be what they promised to be. And if they had another option, if they were interviewing someplace else, they just won't show up. And that's what leads to a lot of turnover. So, you're just super spot on.
Love it.
Yeah, Scott, I was gonna ask you something else. When it comes to recruitment and branding, one of the other things that we talk about a lot is just brand consistency, right? I mean, we work with companies that have 30 different offices, but every single office just uses their own style of communication. And over time, people can start thinking, this must be a Dallas-based company. This must be a Philly-based company. They're not using the same logos, the same colors, the same tone of voice. And oftentimes when a company starts doing that, because automation will help you do that, you actually start looking larger than you are. Your actual message gets amplified. Now, in your case, that problem is, even one step further because you guys acquire so many companies. So, it'd be great to kind of get some, pearls of wisdom from you on how you guys think about your brand.
I think that our brand, I think that our brand is strong, and I think any company automatically assumes that their brand is strong. But specifically, when you start talking about acquisitions and the difficulty of keeping that brand consistent, I think that, and I'm on the outside looking in on some of these acquisitions, that I think that using products like we are using them is kind of like in the cafeteria, like, yes, I like that, no, I don't like that. And I think the fact that we've implemented some of these tools and we have these tools available, make it more attractive. But it's never to the point where if there's an acquisition that we just sort of cram everything down, like here's an acquisition that we've done, like you must use everything that we've used. And I don't want to seem so corporate and say that, it's come down to case studies or white papers or anything like that. It's because we've shared these stories of success across our company. And when our managing partners get together and we talk about it and we ask questions and how did that work for you? Oh, well, then we might want to implement that for us. But when you have 40 to 50 offices singing in concert, that it's so much easier to say, okay, that if it's worked for these 40 to 50, then it's going to work well for us. It may not be 100% from the get-go, but it's a layering in of your brand and using different products to help propel that brand forward.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I mean, and we've seen you guys do regular acquisitions and grow both organically and inorganically. So the fact that you can actually use technology to still keep that one cohesive brand, and you guys also do an incredible job of just talking about that over LinkedIn and social media. So you're certainly doing a bunch of things right here.
Thank you. And we empower all of our producers, and everybody's free to do that. It's like Ron was talking about, we were all talking about it. If you have a good experience, you're going to talk about it. If you had a bad experience, you're going to talk about it. And we all know companies where their own employees have had bad experiences, and they'll say that publicly, even on Glassdoor, even on LinkedIn. It's nice to see the things that are being said about your own company on those platforms from people that you work with, from people that you sit next to in the cube, or somebody that you've met at your own internal conference 6 months ago, that are talking about what a good experience they have as an internal employee of your own company. And then it's trumpeted by other consultants that have worked for you that are on billing for you like that. So one begets the other. So it's always good to be moving in that positive direction.
Yep. Fair enough. So, this is probably a good segue into, how we talked a little bit about how you sort of turbocharge your database. We talked about what you can do with recruitment marketing and your brand. Now let's get to our most important customer, which is the candidate. I mean, how do you engage with your candidates, and how do you engage with your customers, and how can automation help? This is an area that we all can probably talk about for hours, but I'll give you two or three things to think about. One, obviously automations can make your communication way more personal. I'll give you an example of that. I mean, a lot of our customers, what they'll do is anytime they submit a candidate, so they've done their due diligence, whatever they had to do, and now they're essentially saying, let's submit this candidate. The moment they submit this candidate, because this person is now in play, they might immediately get some sort of a welcome message from the CEO. I mean, imagine this is a single candidate in a CEO of a $1 billion company or a $50 million company, now hearing from the CEO and say, we're super excited to work with you. Here is what our company stands for. We'll always treat you with respect. Look forward to the next steps. And then you carry that on by saying, all right, your resume is now being received by the client. Now you have an interview, or, we haven't gotten this information yet. Please hang tight. So the companies that are actually doing that, who are keeping their candidates warm in the candidate pipeline, are seeing up to 70% less candidate drop off, because those people are still there and saying, nope, this company here, Soliant, Waco, they're super engaged with me. I know that they're working on this. I will know exactly when this happens, when the interview comes up. So one, the fact that you can just set it and forget it and give everybody the same consistent experience. Second, you can give them this experience, over a mobile phone. Everybody uses a mobile phone now, over an email, over a phone call. You can create all these experiences mobile first. We have customers who are encouraging people to use emojis and GIFs and just making sure you keep it personal. When you send out a text message, there is information that is pulled directly from your ATS. So if I sent out a message to 300 people and I said, hi, first name, the message you're going to get is going to be, hi, Scott. Hi, Ron. Just as I was thinking about you. Hi, Ron. I still haven't heard from your hiring manager, waiting to see what they come back with, but you're very much on my mind. Imagine how this makes the end candidate feel. But then at the same time, you can convert this communication into a one-on-one conversation anytime somebody responds. So this was an automation. I sent it to 300 people because I just wanted all these 300 people to have the same white glove experience. I did that, but 3 people actually wrote back to me because they had a question, and that immediately converts into a one-on-one conversation seamlessly. So it just allows you to be a way more personal. And so, and I mean, why do we do automation? There's a lot of talk about it improves profitability, it impacts productivity, but one of the things we miss out is sometimes on how it impacts your candidate experience. So, Scott, maybe I'll ask you that. I mean, what's your thought on the importance of candidate experience and candidate care? Like, I mean, I know automation helps you there, but you're a big proponent of that, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think that when you have a company that has, and you have those companies that have full desk, we have full desk where one person does both. They sell and they recruit. We have that, but we also have units within our company where people that are only responsible for business development only focus on our clients. And of course, the recruiters are only focusing on the candidates. I came from a company, like I said, 20 years ago, where salespeople were put up here and you have this army of recruiters that was below. And the most important person, and it just depends on, and I'm saying this as a recruiter, the most important person for the business development person is their client. Without the client, they're nothing. I came in, and I'd like to say I shook things up a little bit by saying, without my candidate, we are nothing. The candidate has to have a good experience with me. The candidate, I mean, from that first phone call all the way through the process, through the length of their contract or their placement. How did they feel when they first, I'd love to know what they thought after the first phone call with me, after the first meeting, after meeting everyone on our team, during that contract, during that engagement, at the end of that engagement. And I'd like to know what they're saying a month later. Do they still feel the same way? Have they fallen out of love with me? Or have they fallen out of love with Vaco? So I have always said since day one that the candidate experience, if you don't have a good candidate experience and you cannot perfect that experience, it's going to come back to bite you later on. And I think that I think that we can get, from time to time, we can get those priorities a little screwed up, honestly. But I have the opportunity as a recruiter to talk to, say, 50 candidates a day, where a salesperson may only have the opportunity to talk to 4 because they've got 4 clients. But within that 4 clients, there may be a myriad of positions. But I've got the opportunity to talk about who I am and what I do and how I do it and how we do it 40, 50, 60 times a day just on the phone. That doesn't include text messages and emails and LinkedIn messages and other experiences via social. The candidate experience is king. If you mess it up, it's not going to work well for you. If you perfect it, you can be a champion.
Yeah, and Scott, I know you touched upon this already, but that's another sort of signature Waco move, if you will. You're one of the fewer companies that we've seen that actually are super involved with these touch points. You ask people after day 1, after day 5, after day 30. So you really have a pulse on what's going on. How do you? I mean, first of all, if you have more nuggets on what's the thinking behind that, but secondly, like, how do you use this feedback? Does this ever get shared with recruiters? Like, what happens there?
It's shared immediately, and much like Ron said, and Pankaj, you've said as well, when we get these survey results, we don't let it linger. It's something that has to happen immediately. We take care of it that day immediately, and it's not like the Eye of Sauron where everybody's saying, okay, you're doing bad, now you need to call it. I mean, it's on. Everybody takes ownership of that. If you've had a bad experience with me, I'm going to nip it in the bud and let's talk about it and see what I could have done better immediately. I think that if you get below average feedback and you let that below average feedback linger for 24 hours, for 48 hours, it's a nightmare. It's a terrible feeling, and it will only get worse because people are left to their own thoughts, and well, they don't care about me, and they read that bad review, and so I'm going to tell my 6 friends, don't go work there. That's the one thing. But on the flip side, that good feedback, that's celebrated. That's not only celebrated with the person that left the positive feedback, but it's also celebrated with the recruiter. I mean, let's put those recruiters on a pedestal and say, you know what, you've done a fantastic job with this. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. And that's not only celebrated with that one recruiter; it's celebrated across the office. And then that way, more pats on the back. I'm gonna keep doing more of that. So because if you celebrate me, I'm gonna rah it every day.
Yeah. Super helpful, Ron. Scott, I was going to touch on one more thing that the title of this slide suggests here. I mean, we obviously talk a lot about candidate experience, as we should, but automation can certainly help you, engage with your customers, with your internal staff. I've got plenty of examples of that, but have you guys started thinking about where that might be helpful?
Yeah, I can't say that we've actually built some workflows in yet, but especially on the front end of attracting new talent, I think there are lots of opportunities to keep that flow of communication going between us and the new kid, just like we would for a contractor that we put out in the field. An internal hire is equally, if not more important, to stay in communication with, given how competitive it is when it comes to finding recruiters. So I think we would like to go back and apply some of those same tools that we're using on the healthcare front to our internal teams as well.
Yeah, and some of this is now becoming table stakes, because I see people going, hey, let's go ask our customers, how's John working out for you after a month? Let's go ask our customers, hey, when would you like to open a new position so we can start sourcing for you beforehand? So there is obviously multiple different ways to engage with customers. But I'll also tell you that some other interesting things that we've seen, which is staffing companies are now starting to use automation to drive sales. They will send out a message to every contractor and say, hey, you've been on your job for 30, 60, 90 days now. Please keep your eyes and ears open. Let us know if anybody in your extended organization is hiring. Send us that lead. We'll send you a referral bonus, but we want to expand within the customer that we're already in. So just, you guys can clearly see why, we think about this a lot, because we absolutely think, sky's the limit when it comes to all of this. But I'm going to move on to, essentially talk about the fourth and the last piece on this, which is around, redeployment. When candidates are actually on assignment, when they're actually working, for you, what does that look like? So, let's talk about what happens when people are now finally your employees. So, you've you've turbocharged your database, you've built your brand, you kept these candidates engaged. Now they start working for you. This is one of those places where most people or most companies can still let this turn into a black hole. Well, now this person's working for us, end of story. So again, the things we talk about a lot is don't let it be a black hole. I mean, stay in touch with your people, keep the dialogue open. These are the same people who are going to send you referrals. These are the same people who are going to send you sales leads. These are the same people who will probably do 6 consecutive assignments with you if their first one had a great experience. And that ultimately leads to redeployment, which I have to tell you is probably the number one place where our customers or staffing industry in general loses money. We've seen companies uh, completely change their profitability because they changed their redeployment from 3% to 17%, simply because they were getting out to people in time. They were letting them know that we're taking care of you. Don't worry about it. We're on top of this. Because if you don't do that, a candidate is bound to get antsy. They're likely going to job boards, probably even to your competition. Uh, so this little graph that I know is super small here that you're seeing here is a super easy way to track how many people are doing their first assignment with your company, how many are doing the second, the third, so on and so forth. And over time, you want that dark orange to keep increasing because people should just keep coming back and dramatically keep reducing your cost per hire. So anyway, Ron, I'll cycle back with you on this, which is, how do you guys think about candidate experience, on assignment experience? I mean, I know you have some really great examples about personalizing this at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the examples that comes to mind when you talk about that is we have an education division, and there's a period in the year where obviously schools are out of session in the summertime, so not uncommon for us to place somebody at the end of a school year, but they don't start again till school starts back up in the fall. So we have this really long period of time between signing to start and actually starting the assignment. And we found that we would lose touch with candidates in that process. They'd drop out of the process. They'd find a better offer. And then we went back and created a workflow that automated communication between candidate and the recruiter or our credentialing team throughout the summer to keep them focused on that assignment. I don't actually have the numbers, but I know, and this was a couple of years ago that we implemented this, but we saw a tremendous change in the number of people that were dropping out of the process, really just by continuing that communication on a weekly or every other week basis.
That's interesting. Because so how long how long between when you sort of hire these people and they actually start a role? I mean, could be like several months before someone is off.
Yeah, it could be a couple of months, probably at the top end of it, anywhere between 2 to 8 weeks. So as you know, I mean, it's easy for a candidate to lose attention. There's this big rush to find the job, get signed on it, and then start the credentialing process. Even the credentialing process for us is fairly elaborate, especially in our hospital setting. So it's not uncommon for someone to drop out of the process when they didn't quite have the right document or know how to get the right document. So and recruiters and sales staff they've closed this deal and they're busy focused on the next thing, and credentialing staff that has a plate full of people they're trying to onboard. So there's a really busy season for all of those resources, and automations allow us to continue to communicate. And like we've talked about before, the communication looks like it's coming from the recruiter or the credentialer, and so it is real engagement.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, really, thank you both of you for all these wonderful examples. I want to summarize by this one slide that hopefully everybody who's listening still can relate to. Please keep in mind that the whole idea behind this is that every single thing that you can do with automation is going to lead to an impact on your P&L. this is exactly what it is about. Every single thing that you see on this slide, sourcing more candidates, profitability, reducing time to submit is profitability, increasing your fill rate is profitability, reducing your drop off, reducing your turnover, improving your referrals. Every single thing has a bottom line impact. So I know this is something that the staffing industry is very much sort of running towards, but those of you who haven't seriously thought about automation, or those of you who still have sort of questions around it, or how easy or hard it is going to be to do this, I think it would be fantastic to start thinking about it now. Obviously, we think of this all the time, so more than happy to have those conversations with all of you as well. But I also wanted to ask a couple of candid questions as we start wrapping up here to to Ron and Scott. So one is, and this is your perspective here that I want, Ron and Scott, which is, obviously investing in technology is daunting, right? I mean, it's a whole new project. Why fix something? Why fix something that isn't broken? So how do you? I mean, can you sort of talk to us about how do you pick the right partner? How do you figure out how did you do what you did? What would you have done differently? Like, what advice would you have for people who are listening to say this is where you start?
I'll jump in with that, and I'll say this, and I talk about references only because during the quarantine I've gotten heavily into Downton Abbey, and have understood the absolute value and the price put on a reference. If someone else has had a good experience with someone that we're partnered with, I want to hear about it. The same can be said for our own business. So the reference, if somebody else provides a good reference on that goes a million miles. The second thing is the ease of implementation. Change is hard, and some companies have very poor change management. Some companies hold our hand and take us through it and make it seem like it's no big deal. And like how we woke up and how was this so easy and why didn't we have this before? Or we don't want the color, we don't want this button blue, we want it orange. And that not to be a big deal, but understanding what we needed and why we needed it and why we wanted something to work a certain way. Because it's much like we approach our clients. It's not when we're walking in with this big 3-ring binder of our methodology and say, this is the perfect way. It's more of a true partnership. Let us hear how we work, and then we want to hear how you work, and then if we can join hands and work together, that's so important. But back to the original, the reference and the ease of implementation and the support after, all the training that's always involved, and it's when it seemed like it's not a big deal, and absolutely we can drop everything and help a new cohort of employers and things like that. I think that all of those are extremely important. And the last thing is always cost. Cheaper, yep. cheaper the better. Bigger, faster, cheaper as always.
Fair enough. Ron, anything to add there?
Yeah, I totally agree that the idea of the reference and just chances are someone that's using one of these tools just to get that firsthand experience with it. I was waiting for the cost comment there, Scott. I'm glad you added that in, but I would say
the cost is always in there. I mean, I couldn't lead off and say, well, if it's cheap, it's probably okay.
Well, I like the order you have. I wouldn't go for just cheap, because there certainly are partners that are more hands-on than others. So I think just the idea of referencing and doing your homework, making sure. I mean, there's lots of great partners out there, but some are a better fit for our company than others. So do your homework when it comes to getting down to the final selections.
Thank you. Super helpful. Ron, Scott, I want to thank both of you for making this time for us, making this time for the audience. I think, both of you run really large businesses, and you've been in the industry for, donkey's years now. So, it's amazing to sort of hear from the ground. Hopefully this added some value to all of our listeners. And, if you want to talk more about automation, if you want to learn more about, how we do it, what our product is like, just head over to the polls, just let us know and we'll follow back up with you. But thank you so much for hanging in there with us. And with that, I'll thank Ron and Scott once again, and let you guys enjoy the next session. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.